Welcome to SimpleSoftware 204, Index and Batch Logs. The index and batch logs are how the information you enter into SimpleIndex is exported for use with third-party programs like databases or document management systems. The index log stores all of your index information as well as a reference to the image or file that you have indexed, and that information can be used to link those files to a database or document management system. The batch log is used primarily for tracking productivity. It tells you how many files were scanned, which users scanned them, and some more information about each batch that has been run. So let's get a look at what a batch log and index log look like. And to do this, we're going to run the barcode demo. And we're just going to let it process and finish. And I've created a shortcut to my images folder, and if we go to the invoice processing logs folder, we'll see that two files are created when we run that job. There's an index log and a batch log. And the file naming scheme is totally controllable by you, and we'll get into how that's done. When you first set up SimpleIndex, the default index log file extension is IDX, which may or may not be suitable. It's actually a legacy holdover from previous versions. You can now set that to CSV, which is what I would recommend because that's actually the format that the file is in. If you want to be able to look at this file, you can right-click on the IDX file and say Open With, tell it to select a program from a list, and then tell it to use Notepad. And check always use the selected program to open this kind of file. And now you can double click on the IDX logs and view them in Notepad and see what the contents are. So we can see in this IDX file we have all the two barcode fields initially, the first barcode, the second barcode, and then our auto number. And then the fourth field is the path to the image file, and you'll notice it uses a relative path by default, so that this index file can be moved to another server along with the images, and all you have to do is tell it where the base folder is, and the images will all line up there. So it's to be independent of the location of the files is why the relative path is used there. The number of pages in the file is the next to last field, and then the last field is a batch ID, which is using the date and time as a unique ID for that batch. The batch log contains the username, in which case, since we didn't log on, we have the default user. I'll show you how to configure users later on in this class. The start time, end time, the number of seconds in the batch. This field is storing the revision level, which we aren't using, which is why it's -1. This is the number of pages in the batch and the batch ID. So you see the batch ID exists in both the index log and the batch log, and can be used to link the images scanned in the image log to the batch record in the batch log if you want to import those into your custom database. So now that we've seen the contents of the index and batch log, let's see the settings that we use to create these. The log settings are all on the logging tab. And we see we can enable or disable the index and batch logs independently, so you don't have to output the log files if you aren't using them. We see here in the basic logging options that there's really not a whole lot to how you create the index and batch logs. The format is pretty much predefined. In some of the advanced courses we can get into how you can really customize the format if you need to. Generally, the comma delimited format that SimpleIndex outputs by default is readily usable by any document management system or database. I referred to the IDX file extension. If you want to change that, over here in your log file naming scheme, the first setting allows you to set the file extension that you want to use. So as I mentioned, CSV is a good file extension because it will automatically open the file in Excel if you haven't Microsoft Excel installed on the machine, and that's pretty handy. TXT will allow you to open it in Notepad automatically without having to configure the file extension. Or you can put anything you want. You can put ABC, whatever you want. And the same with the batch log, you can change that to whatever you want as well. Now the date interval is what determines how many logs you're going to create and when a new log will be created. As you can see here from the preview of the file name here and the actual file name that we got down here, under the index log we're using the current date and time to create the file name. And we see here that will create a unique index log for each batch that you scan. For the batch log, we have it selected to create them by month. And as we can see here in the preview and here in our batch log, if the file name for each batch we run, each batch log has a file name of 2007-07, then for the whole month of July, the batch log file is going to be appended to this file. And then on August 1st, a new file will be created, 2007-08, and all the batch log information will go into that file. So the idea behind the date interval is that the log file will continue to grow up until this interval is reached, and you can do it by the hour, by the day, month, year, or none to have no date interval and use some other information to generate the file name. By default, the file name is just index log. In the advanced settings, you can change, and you can actually use a field name and other settings to generate the file name as well. But if you want to create unique files for each batch, you have to use time. The formatting options available to you, the main formatting option is your delimiter. There's a few preset options. Tab is the word TAB spelled out because obviously if you hit tab, you go to the next checkbox instead of actually entering tab in here. So you have to put the word tab to use a tab separator. Any other delimiter, pipe, semicolon are in the list. You can have an ABC delimited file. Whatever you want can be entered in here, and that'll be used to separate the fields in your index and batch logs. The basic options available for your log format are whether you want to output the field names on the first line, which will make it so that the first line of your index log has category, document ID, number, file name, the names of the field columns on the first line of the file. Put quotes around each field. As you can see, there's quotes surrounding the field names in each field, and the reason for that is if you have a field with a comma in it, if you don't have quotes surrounding the field value, then when you go to import this file into some system, it'll interpret these as two fields instead of one if it's a comma delimited file. So you want to have the quotes in a comma delimited file. However, in a tab separated or pipe separated file, those characters are not going to appear in the index values, and you don't necessarily need the quotes for those file formats. And then lastly, you can choose to output the full path to the exported files. As I mentioned, it's handy to have the relative path in there because then you can move the files around and you don't have to update your index files, which is a big pain. But if you want to, you can have the full path entered into the output file. So if your database import function needs that full path, you can have that. And so those are the basic logging functions available to you, and how to enable the index and batch log, and what they look like and what they do.